We are giving you a live look now from the White House in Washington. President Trump says he is not ruling out trying to serve a third term.
Yeah, in a phone interview with NBC News this weekend, he said that he was, quote, not joking about the possibility, though he did say it's too early to really get into it.
In 1951, the 22nd Amendment was created after President Franklin D. Roosevelt was elected 4 times in a row. It says that no person shall serve as commander-in-chief more than twice. But in a recent interview with NBC News, Trump said that there are methods to potentially breach that constitutional barrier.
Supporters claim there's a loophole with the 2-term constitutional limit. The president said, again, it's far too early to seriously think about it. It's raising a lot of eyebrows. So let's bring in Chief Legal Analyst Collie Rhodes into this conversation. So is there really a way around this 2-term limit system that was set forth by George Washington?
I don't think so. I mean, to your point, George Washington was suggested to do a 3rd term. He rejected, saying that it would divide the country, that it would lead to some type of tyranny. All right, I'm not going to do it. Ulysses S. Grant tried to do it as well. It was unsuccessful. You had Theodore Roosevelt do it. You had FDR that actually did it. And in 51, it became something that couldn't be done. I don't think there's a clear pathway to doing it. I say clear because I think you have 2 amendments that you have to look at, the 22nd and the 12th. We talked about the 12th, which is we talked about the 22nd, but the 12th is one that I think would prohibit this other kind of workaround or this loophole that they're mentioning, potentially having maybe J.D. Vance run as the vice president and then as president have Trump run as the vice president. Well, the 12th Amendment says no person constitutionally ineligible to the office of president should be eligible to that of vice president. And so I think that would stop any of those potential loopholes. The only caveat I'd say, and this is like a very, very, very small, like maybe the period at the end of the sentence, small type of caveat, is if you're saying that his eligibility to be president isn't barred by the 22nd, but it's the eligibility of just what you need to do to hold the office, the age requirement, the citizenship requirement, those things. If those are the lists that they were mentioning or intending to mention in the 12th Amendment of my eligibility to be the president, and they didn't contemplate, which they couldn't have because it wasn't there at the time, the 22nd, then I could see that's a potential loop around as I'm turning around the straightway, which would be the normal path to get there.
Okay, so maybe he is just toying with the idea, but if this becomes legitimate in the next 6 months to a year, where do you see this going to U.S. Supreme Court? I mean, how do you see this logistically playing out?
Logistically, you need states to be able to, come forth and say, I want to make a constitutional amendment. And so then having a constitutional amendment would be a couple of ways. You'd have 2/3 of Congress have to come forward, or you need 34 states to ask for some type of constitutional convention. President Trump is extremely popular. I mean, very, very popular. Look at the states across the country where he won. He won by landslides in some of those states. I just don't think there's 34 states that would support a constitutional amendment, i.e. maybe 2 constitutional amendments that you would need for him to be president. So I don't see that happening, but that would need to occur. And then if it's for some reason we got 2/3 of Congress, or we got a constitutional convention and we got 34 states to say it, then you need 38 states to ratify it. And then even after that, it could potentially lead to court. So there's maybe like 15 hurdles before this could actually ever occur. But what I will say is I wouldn't put it past President Trump. I mean, once he says something and he puts his mind on doing it, the attempt to do it could happen. I mean, he said multiple times, I'm not joking about this. I'm extremely serious. I mean, we just have time within 4 years for him to make a determination, but a lot can happen within that time. But right now, and this is something that he's considering, I just don't think there's a legal pathway to get there.
Well, and we talk about the wording, or people have been talking about the wording in the amendment, saying that maybe that would be a tiny loophole, saying, elected versus you kind of came in, like you mentioned with J.D. Vance, potentially handing over power. Is that a teeny tiny loophole with the wording? Is that what lawyers try to naggle at there? But this word says this, but it's the intention, right?
The details are for sure in the wording. I think the 12th Amendment would stop that, even if you're saying, look, the elected portion of the 22nd would say, okay, I wasn't elected, I was appointed, or I just walked into it. But the 12th says you can't have it because you're ineligible. So that would even stop that portion from occurring. I mean, it would be a number of arguments back and forth if this went to court. I think this would be something more mock trial that you want law students to kind of argue and kind of debate and have an opportunity to, kind of have a fun play with it. But if this was in a real court, I think there's too much precedent here. I mean, 1951 is probably the clearest one, but even if you're looking back to the 12th Amendment way further than that, I think that stops any opportunity. If there was any momentum with this really happening, the Constitution is something that would stop it.
Khalif, whether you're for or against President Trump, if this were to happen, all right, let's just go all the way to the end. He's able to do a third term. What's the precedent that this sets 10 years, 20 years from now, decades from now, allowing a president to have a third term?
I think it would be problematic, and I think we've already had this happen, and so we don't even have to play crystal ball. 1951, I mean, instantly after Roosevelt dies and is unable to go forth with his fourth term, Congress acts and says we can't have this happen again. We were already in a situation where we were, at the will of this individual that, rightfully so, did a lot during that time. Had a war, tried to rebuild a country. There was a lot happening, and so they were like, hey, we might as well stick with the person that's leading us during this time. I think that after that ended, as soon as he was not able to go forward, he passed away, Congress said, we can't do this again. We have to ensure that the people have an opportunity to elect someone of their own will.
We tried it once and we decided it didn't work, so we're just going to stick with what is in the Constitution.
Just somehow that's a good idea.
All right. Well, yeah, certainly a complicated path. The president says it's still far too early, but he is serious, so we'll kind of see what we come up with over the next couple weeks, months, days, and years. But Khalif, thanks for mapping that out for us.